And welcome Nico to start off our
Maybe both of them stop the time myself.
You
That's
can.
okay.
And I will comment.
So this house believes that Europe would be the greater option, the better option for this immigrant in question. And to start off this debate, we could look at some differences between these two countries. On one hand, we have Europe, the oldest civilization that has survived to see the modern world, a collection of countries that, yes, do work in strong cooperation with each other, but which still possess a great cultural diversity and a great variety of countries. We have a great number of countries. This also implies a great variety of cultural backgrounds, of sort of indigenous cultural systems. On the other hand, we have the U.S., a sort of modern federal state, yes, a really just a state of one single culture, of one single nation, which has obviously grown to become a very united place behind one dream. And what could this imply for the immigrant in question? Well, looking at Europe, we have, as said, a great cultural diversity. So, strikes me as if he'd probably have a greater likelihood of finding the culture that suits himself the best in Europe. In fact, we could go on to say that Europe is a federal state without the limitations of actually being legally a federal state, while still having the allowances. We have the Schengen area. Immigrant can freely move between countries, find which one works the best for him, which one has the policies that perhaps most closely resemble those of his home country. While in the US, you have the limitations of a federal state, the being limited to only one country, one policy. Another point, which definitely speaks in for choosing Europe, is the European social model, an inclusive, humane model by which everyone is created equal, just as in America, I'll admit, but then everyone is supported equally, regardless of how well they're willing to work, how good they are, how they stand in society, because our immigrant will inherently be in a lower position, in a worse position than inhabitants in the country into which he'll move. And in this situation, he will obviously want a system where everyone is provided equally, where there are no criteria for being given, say, healthcare, social aid, basic human rights that will help him survive and thrive. And this will then allow him to find work, to be in peace for the first few years, perhaps find an education, and then go on to fulfill his dreams. Well, this is not possible in the US system, where we don't have, we could say we don't have healthcare for everyone. You need an insurance to be able to access healthcare. We don't provide for people who are dislocated, who are unemployed. These people are on their own, and isn't the likelihood of our immigrant becoming unemployed, dislocated, or something like this, something unfortunate, quite high in the first years? He doesn't speak the language, he doesn't know the cultural norms, he doesn't have even if he would have an education, it's probably not very, very useful in the country to which he'll move. So, obviously, there will be a great probability of this happening. If we look at the economy then, in the US, to give you some numbers, 0.1% of the population owns almost 1/4 of the wealth, 1% owns almost half the wealth. Well, our immigrant coming, where will he be placed along the Gini curve? Will he be in the top 1%? No, he won't. He will be in the say, lowest 10%. Well, in that case, will he not want that lowest 10% to own as much wealth as ever possible? I think so, at least. While in Europe, these numbers are a lot more humane. There is at least some kind of equality in society, economic equality, and fortunately, economic equality is sort of something that is necessary for social equality and happiness. So, actually, how much time is it now? I lost my
1.5 minutes.
1.5 minutes. Yeah. So, to move towards some kind of summary at this point. Actually, yes.
Wouldn't you agree that the current crisis with the euro and southern European countries
No doubt, but at the same time, we have an economic crisis in the US, which has not fully survived for. Economies worldwide have gone down in recent years. And here again, we see a good example of the kind of brotherhood that Europe is best at, that it always has exhibited. Other countries will go and help the countries that are in the need of help, and we will all come out on top. This is in fact a great sort of metaphorical representation of what Europe stands for, of out of many, one common goal, and one good. So to summarize, we have on one hand, we have an old combination of states all working under the Schengen area, under the EU, something very close to a federal state without limitation of federal state. Europe, an old area that has always been known for its brotherhood, its inclusiveness, its humanity. And on the other hand, we have a rather cold, competitive US that is not able to provide for its worst members, and will not be nearly as good a home for this immigrant of ours. Oh, it's right on time.
I thank Nico for his speech, and welcome Konstantin to start outside.
Hello, I will give an opening speech for the opposition. And first of all, I would like to introduce our speakers. And so, I am Konstantin, and I would introduce the other topics which we would state, and then I would talk a bit about the language problem and the economy of US and EU. Then our second speaker, she would talk about the attitude to immigration in EU and US. And our third speaker would mention the history of US and history of EU and how it affects our problem, and the homogeneity of EU and US. So, considering the economy, if we compare US and EU economy, the figures show that US have smaller unemployment rate. Like in general, around US the average is less than 6%, and EU is about 10%, but it's the average, and in some countries of EU we have much higher unemployment rate, up to 20%. That's also true about US, but we found that there is no such extreme state where the unemployment rate is really high. And the economic growth over the last years is higher in US. It's about 3% of GDP growth per year, and in EU, in average, was about 0.2%. So, also, considering the language problem, well, if the immigrant end up in US, in any of states, well, there is English, and we can say that, well, English is not the easiest language to learn, but it's not hardest language to learn. Not like some languages which are spoken in countries in EU. English can be easier than some of these languages. And also, well, if you end up in some state in US, you can move around US, and after you learn the language, you can speak that language in any state, and it would be the official language there. Of course, in some states, there would be also a big population which speak some other language, but English would still be an official language, which is not true about you. Well, you can move around you, around different countries if you have citizenship of one of them, but there would be a language barrier, because the official language would be different in different countries, and that doesn't give such freedom of movement as a person have in US. So, thank you.
Thank Konstantin for his speech. And welcome Carlos to continue to play the song.
Thank you. So, the first speaker of the opposition pointed out that the economic growth in the United States is currently larger than the economic growth in the EU. This is technically true, but the impact of the economic growth on for the individual is not that relevant, really, because there is really no way it shows other than that it is possible that more jobs are created. But overall, the GDP will grow in any case in a varying degree every year. But the economy of the EU is currently 17 billions as a GDP product, while the US has a GDP product of 16 billions. So the EU has a larger economy. So whether or not the US is currently growing faster or slower is not that relevant, since the EU has a larger economy in any case. Now, the first speaker of the opposition also pointed out that English is an easier language than others. This is entirely subjective. Who are we to objectively say that one language is easier to learn than another? English is just as difficult as any other language for this individual. He doesn't speak any native language in neither the EU nor the US, so the language will be difficult anyways. The speaker also pointed out that it is easier to move around in the US since it's one country, while the EU is a union of countries. This is, it does sound good, but in reality, the Schengen Agreement between the countries in the EU have already overcome this barrier. It's increasingly easy to move in the EU. You only need to carry an ID when you want to cross the border. You're not checked in any specific way. You will just pass the border, and at some random point, you might be checked if you have a legitimate ID. But this is not a problem for immigrants, since he's offered full citizenship in the EU. Now, the first speaker of the opposition also pointed out that it is easier to move around in the US since English is spoken everywhere. It sounds very convincing, but then again, the Europeans all study several languages, so the disadvantage isn't really that big on a scale, since the social model in any case will wait up for this. The living conditions, the working conditions, the healthcare, the whole range of things will easily overcome the fact that everyone doesn't have English as their native language. The speaker also pointed out that there are big populations of other language speakers in the US, i.e. people who speak other languages than English. That's also true, but then again, it's quite obvious already at the first glance that the linguistic diversity is much larger in the EU, but most of the countries have their own native language, with a few exceptions. So this is also a moot point for the US. And so yes, all in all, it's quite social model quite easily weighs up for any eventual disadvantage in terms of a uniform language. Yes, I can take it.
Okay. Are you aware that just because each European country has a different language doesn't mean that all those languages aren't spoken in the US as well? That the US isn't just like has a language diversity just as large as the European Union States?
Yes, they do have a large language diversity in terms of languages, but in terms of languages on a scale, it's quite obvious that the US has a huge majority of English speakers, while the European Union has no clear majority of one large language. So in this case, it's certainly a more favorable sort of diversity in the European Union than in the US. Thank you.
I thank Klaus for his speech and welcome Alex to continue on the side proposition. But one more point before that. Could anyone, like, when you are offering POIs, could you stand up from the point that you're offering them? Like, not just when you're accepted, because that way I always notice that someone is trying to take one. Okay. But the floor is yours.
Thank you for your pitches. In my speech, I would like to discuss the anti-immigration in Europe. Nowadays, in the EU elections, the right-wing group of parties has had an alarming growth, and they have done very well in elections. For example, these right-wing groups have entered the government in Austria, Denmark, Italy, Netherlands, Poland, France, and also in Finland. These right-wing groups, they have they oppose immigration a lot. They have some of these parties have very racist views, and they don't accept immigrants, and they would want to form